Hello everyone, and welcome also from my side to SAP TechEd. The next 25 minutes we are going to look together at how you can embrace the future and transform your business leveraging generative AI and SAP solutions. My name is Jana Richter and I'm a Vice President for Artificial Intelligence at SAP. So before we get started, let me just mention again, we will have a Q&A towards the end. So in case you have some questions, just send them over chat and we can take care of them at the end of the session. And now let's have a brief look. And let's get started with looking at artificial intelligence in general. Well, SAP is realizing the intelligent enterprise since a couple of years already, and we infuse AI into SAP-powered business processes and SAP solutions. And AI is, of course, based on the rich data that sits within your business processes and solutions. And actually, artificial intelligence is a pretty broad term where typically you look at historical data and data that the model has been trained with. This model then understands patterns and can, next to visualizing the relevant data in an analytics context, give you some additional insights, leverage a higher level of automation, and you have a vast majority of techniques ranging from pattern detection, deep learning models, over self-learning systems, autonomous systems, and human-machine interaction natural language processing patterns. And actually what became new into the mix is that there's generative artificial intelligence that unlocks a totally new set of capabilities. And what is that? Why is generative AI such a steep increase in what is possible with AI? Well, first of all, one of the big potential is that non-technical users now can interact with foundation models and large language models to solve their business tasks by actually describing them in natural language, which really reduces the barrier to interact with AI. And secondly, foundation models and large language models are pre-trained on a large set of data. And with this pre-training, they are broadly applicable to many tasks out of the box without the need to train and retrain models extensively. So if you look a bit more deeper, actually foundation models can be trained on a vast set of data ranging from text over speech, images, up to structured data. And then those foundation models are applicable to many tasks either out of the box, with zero-shot or just a few-shot learnings. But to make them really work in the context, you need to adapt it for the specific use case with a variety of tasks that can range from prompt engineering, which can really get super sophisticated, over embeddings and fine-tuning of the model down to grounding. And next to really being applicable out of the box, large language models really open up a new set of capabilities that we as humans rather consider to be creative. That ranges from summarizing large interactions and large texts, if you think of a customer interaction history, writing assistants with a few bullets, you can generate really nice and consumable text, not just in one language, but maybe even in a variety of languages. You can realize question and answering scenarios where people can ask questions and get really summarized answers out of the box, up to code generation. And code generation, not just the pure code, but including sample data, test cases, API documentation, and so on. Well, having said that, let's have a brief look at the SAP Business AI approach. Because what we do at SAP is that we apply artificial intelligence really to business solutions, which comes with quite a different set of capabilities that you look at. Because whenever we apply AI, it needs to be relevant in the respective business solution and respective business process. And it has to be reliable, so really connected to the right set of data, really visible within the context of your application when you get a recommendation from an AI and when you have a more classical technology applied. And of course, responsibility is key because GDPR compliance need to be adhered to, and we have to ensure that no bias is manifested within the systems. And SAP has a really strong ethics framework in place to ensure this. If we look at the right side of the visualization, what do we actually do when we apply AI to business processes? Well, first of all, we can really change the whole way how humans interact with systems and with SAP solutions so that we facilitate a human-machine interaction. So meaning you can interact in a natural language with the SAP solution and then get really guidance through the system. Second, we look at automation. So really reaching a higher level of automation where you have to do less repetitive tasks that are based on historical data, but users can then really focus on the more complex tasks, decision-making, taking care of customers and innovation. And thirdly, when you do so, also AI supports you in this end by giving you additional insights and predictions. Because meanwhile, if you look at complex tasks, there's a vast set of data involved where you not necessarily can oversee that easily and where AI can help you to augment your decisions and your cognition. And if we go back to the architecture picture, there's a variety of components involved. First of all, Joule has been announced recently, and you might have heard it in the keynotes already, so a co-pilot that really understands your business and is integrated across the entire SAP solution suite, and we will have a brief view on this later on. Next, we really embed the AI capabilities across the entire portfolio, ranging from cloud ERP over human capital management, spend management, and so on. And we do see repetitive patterns and similar architectures in place, and thus we do have an AI foundation with reusable technology and common components as part of the business technology platform. And this in turn is closely connected to a rich AI ecosystem of partnerships and investments with a couple of partners that you see outlined below. Well, as mentioned beforehand, AI is already a central and integrated capability in the entire set of SAP solutions and applications, already used by tens of thousands of cloud customers. I would like to focus in this visualization actually on the middle example that you can see here, to give you an idea how generative AI gives us an additional boost on what is possible. Already since a couple of years, we have integrated AI capabilities into AI, Concur Invoice, where every quarter 110 million documents are processed, meaning that from invoices, meanwhile, automatically we extract not only the text, but really the relevant business entities and map them to the relevant transaction fields. And users just have to check if all the entries are correct and don't have to manually type this into the respective fields. We do have an AI service used behind the scenes that really increases productivity massively. So if we equate that across the entire SAP customer base, we can talk about 440 million annual savings globally. To the service that is used here behind the scenes, document information extraction, which, as mentioned, exists since a couple of years already in its base form to process and automate business document processing for selected document types like invoices, we now bring generative AI into the game and kind of supercharge it, which means we automate the business document processing for now a broader set of document types. So virtually any kind of document type can be processed now by leveraging Gen AI, and we get built-in support for 40+ languages. And that allows us to realize scenarios like SAP Transportation Management, where delivery note processing can be automated now by using document information extraction with generative AI. So imagine trucks arrive at your warehouse regularly, and there might be delivery notes that manually need to be processed at the gate. And that's a manual process where really at the gate, the trucks need to wait until the respective fields are filled. And now, using AI capabilities here, we can conduct, first of all, automated checks with greater accuracy and minimize errors, bring more information in, and significantly reduce the hours spent on manual checks and waiting times for logistics carriers. And that, of course, in turn, improves operational efficiency. So this is really a really nice example from my point of view when we look at automation. I'm not going to show this today, but if you're interested in a bit more details around this, tomorrow there will be a session which is called Jumpstart Your Document Processing Use Case with Generative AI by my colleagues Tobias Weller and Thomas Janasch. So I would highly recommend to visit this one. Another example that I would like to share is how we embed large language models into SAP Analytics Cloud with a feature that is called Just Ask. And as the name says, you can just ask the questions and get faster insights with natural language into all the values and into your data models, and really have a trusted retrieval in place. And in order to give you an idea, let's move to a demo and let me show you how this looks like. We are within my Analytics Cloud tenant, and I'm going to use the Just Ask feature. Click on it now, and then we can see I have a couple of data available here. So I will take this sample model, can already get an idea which measures are available, and I'm specifically interested in the quantity sold. And now I can ask a natural question around show me quantities sold per location, and I want to have that sorted by quantity. And after I've asked that question, it takes a moment, and I do get a suitable chart in the right chart type and with the right filters applied automatically. What you can see, well, that's a big view. Maybe I'm just interested in the top 5 results. So I can extend here my prompt, and then the view gets adjusted, and we can see I see the top 5 results. So what is happening is that actually my natural language has been understood, and it's pretty clear that I want to have that sorted by quantity sold, and I want to have the rank applied for the top 5. What you also see is that you get some natural language suggestions where you can also look at some alternative measures that you might be interested in, like quantity sold by store. So that's a very natural way to interact with an SAP system and get the insights that you're interested in. In the next step, I want to show you even the broader view around how you can interact in natural language with SAP systems. And you have heard of Joule most likely already, which is the co-pilot that truly understands your business. And that really helps you to get insights and quick answers on demand, no matter where you are within your applications. Again, I think it's best to see that within the system. And for this, let me move back to my browser. And I'm here at my start page. So this is SAP Start, where I get all the main KPIs across the variety of SAP systems that are connected. And here you see the new symbol for Joule. And you can see that a sidebar is opening where I can interact with Joule, my co-pilot. And it takes a sec. Oh, that's kind of sad. Let me load again. If it doesn't work, I do have a backup video, so let me try again if we do have some network issues or if it's working out now. Okay, sorry for that. So that's why we always have a plan B. So let me get started with the backup video that we do have in place for that. Come on. Okay, I do have a backup video, but now there it is. This is what's happening if we do live demos. Okay, so you can see that we do have our UI that we've seen beforehand, and now I'm opening Joule, the digital assistant, that really allows me to interact in natural language. And what I'm doing is that I want to give feedback to a colleague. Well, in natural language, I can just ask that question and then say, I want to give the feedback to Andrea, who is a sales associate, because we just recently collaborated around TechEd, and I want to give some feedback, like that we've done a great TechEd preparation together, and by looking at some details and getting guided through the whole process, I can interact in natural language the feedback that I would like to share with her. Okay, so after I entered the respective text, let me then stop and say I want to send this feedback now, and having done so, I can dive a bit deeper and look into the feedback that I've just sent. And you can see that I navigate right away into the right application context, into the respective UIs, and have a very natural way to interact here. Next, I can also ask a couple of different questions, because if I, for example, don't remember anymore how I can create a new purchase order, I can also ask this kind of how-to question and then get according help from the SAP documentation and all the relevant insights that I'm interested in. So you can see here that I get a summarized result from the documentation, but also a link to the respective documentation topics. And I can navigate naturally then into the documentation and get even more details if the generated summary is not sufficient for my needs. But that's a very natural way to interact with the SAP systems and to move ahead. Good. So after we've seen that brief demo, I wanted to give you insights into a couple of examples, just that you get an idea how it feels to interact with large language models, with generative AI embedded into the SAP solutions. And of course, these were now just a few examples. If you look at the built-in capabilities that are planned to be made available across the entire SAP solution portfolio and across LOBs, you can see that there's a multitude of additional generative AI scenarios, realizing some of the patterns that we asked or discussed beforehand, like question-answer scenarios, summarizing customer profiles, scheduling assistance and interactions. We've looked at natural language examples already, and we do see a couple of capabilities, like, for example, in an SAP SuccessFactors context, how you can then generate job descriptions on a few bullets and the context that you have within the SAP system. What you can also notice from the visualization is that generative AI is an additional toolbox, opens up a lot more capabilities, but all the black entries are AI capabilities that are more based on deep learning mechanisms or forecasting algorithms. So we do see a mix of generative AI and more classical AI in place. And with that, I hope I was able to give you a brief overview and raise some interest into generative AI. I would encourage you to learn even more by visiting the respective links. We just announced an open SAP course around Gen AI that you can find on the respective learning.sap.com pages. And with that, let me open for the Q&A.
Live Q&A.
Okay, so I can see so far 2 questions. And let me start with a question from Sandeep Mandula, which is how many models we have as of now other than LLM. For different business needs, do we need various models? Are these models going to put extra load on the database? And actually, that's a very good point, because large language models are, of course, one of the type of generative AI capabilities that we do see, and where we've seen a couple of examples just a few minutes ago. But as mentioned in the last circle page, indeed, not everything can and should be realized by large language models and Gen AI, but they are classical deep learning models. A couple of algorithms are best done directly in the database if you think of time series forecasting, outlier detection, and similar patterns. And thus, it's pretty much dependent on the very specific use case, if this is a deep learning model, a database algorithm, or a large language model, as AI is a rather broad term. Good. Then the next one that I would like to share, let me look which one we take. Let's take the one with the 3 votes from Norbert Kölbel, which is there some sort of demo environment or trial of Joule available that partners and customers can use? At the moment, not yet. So you've seen the announcements. In the upcoming weeks and months, we will step-by-step integrate Joule into a variety of SAP solutions where this then can be used by partners and customers alike. But that's why TechEd, and just a few days back, you've seen a couple of those announcements, is really where you get the first insights into Joule and the capabilities. Good. Then the next step, we look at a question from Rodrigo Krüger, which has an additional vote, which is about, is it possible to extend Joule for customer-specific prompting? And that's a pretty good question. Actually, what we've taken as a first step is to really say Joule is integrated in SAP solutions out of the box, really addressing main questions that are the same for all customers, so that we really provide content as part of the SAP solutions. Of course, then adding extensibility and custom capabilities is something more down the road in the roadmap, where we plan to start with really the option that you can ask customer-specific questions to your own policy documents, to your own documents as part of the SAP processes, and then over time add more and more capabilities. But this relates a bit back to the explanation beforehand that we don't make this just a pure technology that you then need to apply individually to your use cases, but that we really embed this first and foremost into the SAP solutions, and from there then over time provide extensibility means. Good. Then let me see which question has the next number of votes, and the next one is from Peter van Vliet, which is, sorry, it's moving here, is Just Ask or Joule going to be available directly on DataSphere? And I mean, it's an interesting question. From a architecture perspective, of course, those topics are connected, right? So Just Ask is really the natural language interaction within Analytics Cloud. I've shown you Joule, which is then the broader digital assistant across the entire portfolio, where we plan to embed the Just Ask capabilities as well, so that you have that part of natively of your Analytics Cloud experience, but also as part of Joule. And of course, DataSphere is a relevant data provider, relevant data lake. So in an overall architecture, the capabilities are connected, but there's not a strict dependency. And it doesn't mean that Joule is now part of DataSphere, but it's really part of the applications where we embed it. Then let me take the next question. We still have a few minutes left, which is from Wafa. How do you prevent Joule from providing biased responses or putting sensitive data at risk? And along those lines, I think I mentioned that at the beginning, we do have strong ethics frameworks in place. So every Gen AI use case and every AI use case in general needs to go through a very strong ethical steering committee within SAP, and where we make sure that the right level of data is used for realizing the use cases, where we make sure that there's test cases in place, that any kind of bias is avoided, where we do make sure that really across the entire chain, the right level or the desired level of interaction and results are guaranteed. And secondly, with regards to sensitive data, of course, that's a relevant question as well. I mean, the large language models are trained out of the box. So the large language models are trained and connected to the SAP solutions, but whenever you send the data, it's actually an inference to the model. So we are then not storing the data for retraining the models, but we rather have an inference and you do get a result back. And of course, we do have the standard SAP product standards applied so that you can be sure that here GDPR compliance is ensured. Good. So then the next one is from Len, where the question is, will there be versions of Joule pre-trained for specific domains? For example, logistics, financial management, service management, human capital management. And this is exactly what I mentioned beforehand. Indeed, we do provide the AI capabilities embedded as part of the SAP solutions. And what we've seen is already that I was able to ask in natural language questions like give feedback to a colleague, which is actually a capability that you get as part of the human capital management integration out of the box. So that's exactly the approach, that it's pre-trained, pre-configured, made available as part of the SAP solutions with content that is applicable out of the box before we then go down the route of extensibility. Good. Then we do have a question from Indra, which is, are these LLMs created by SAP or are you using GPT models from OpenAI? Good question as well, and I know we've gone very briefly through the slides. I've shown a slide beforehand where you've seen this architectural picture, and indeed we do partner around standard large language models with many providers. So Microsoft OpenAI is one of the partners, but we also partner with Aleph Alpha, with Google, with IBM, with Databricks, Cohere, and many more, where we can really leverage best-of-breed large language models from partners. What SAP is investing into is to really develop own large language or own foundation models on top of structured data, and of course in really fine-tuning models for SAP-specific domains, for really having sophisticated prompts and grounding in the SAP context to really have it highly applicable for the SAP-specific domains and for the SAP-specific data. Then, thanks a million for joining the session and have a nice day. Goodbye.